Hello Internet! I am Fenris, host of the gaming commentary show that nobody watches, Fenris and Friends. Today, rather than host a Let's Play, I've decided to do a game review, something I've always wanted to do, but I've really never had the chance to do. We'll be looking at a game that I grew up with, and many of you likely did not know existed. So, let's dive in! In 1995, LucasArts released Star Wars Dark Forces, a first-person shooter built from the ground up using an engine created in-house, aptly called the Jedi Engine. While not a true 3D engine, it allowed for three-dimensional environments with no limits to the third dimension. After Dark Forces, they added the capacity for 2 rooms to be rendered on top of each other at the same time, something that could not be achieved in the ever-popular Doom engine. However, only one other game was ever made with the Jedi engine, a spaghetti western-style shooter titled Outlaws. Yeah, Outlaws. Like, who actually remembers this game? Well, quite a few people, actually. A few weeks ago, I made a post to r/gaming of Reddit asking if anybody remembered Outlaws. The post was received quite positively, actually, almost getting me 600 karma. But what shocked me were the comments. People did remember playing Outlaws, and for the most part, loving it as well. Back when I was a kid, I didn't even know anybody else who had even heard of this game. Everybody else was busy playing Doom or Duke Nukem, and I was busy playing the demo to Outlaws, and I wouldn't have traded the experience for the world. Most people remember the game just having played the demo, which at the time had a limited spread. At the time, your best chance of getting game demos were from discs that came from gaming magazines at the time, and even if you had internet, something like that would have taken you hours to download. I remember my dad having a group of friends who played the game, so my bet is that one of them lent him the demo on a disc. But eventually my dad upgraded to the full package, so for those of you who missed out, this review is for you! Now, to my knowledge, there was a bit more material that was released with this game. I seem to recall a guidebook and a CD of extra missions, but information on the web is scarce about this obscure game, so all that I know is limited to my own copy only. The story of Outlaws is a simple one. This jerk of a railroad tycoon named Bob Graham wants to buy tons of land to build a railroad and make tons of money.
Where now there are struggling farms, I see a gleaming city rising from the parched plains. A city that has my name on it.
And has an army of thugs under his hire to make sure he reaches that goal.
You will enlighten them. Go out there and don't come back till I can look at this map and know that every inch of it is mine.
The hero of our story, retired U.S. Marshal James Anderson, isn't selling his farm, however. He seems to be enjoying his life with his trophy wife Anna and his young daughter Sarah.
Shall I write a list for you?
Nope. Got it in my head, ain't I?
You better had.
2 pounds of flour, 1 ham salted, 1 pound of sugar, fruit if they got any, calico, 8 yards, and if there's any cash left, some of that flowery water.
Rose water.
Yeah, rose water. I think that just about covers it.
Marshal James Anderson buying perfume. This is history.
This is marriage.
So, Graham sends one of his goons, Dr. Death, who looks like a long-lost cousin of Hugo Strange, to persuade Anderson otherwise, but the good doctor botches it up by murdering Anderson's wife and kidnapping his daughter.
Now that is what I meant by enlightenment. I did not mean burn down the property, kill the wife, and kidnap the child.
Oh, well, I guess things just got a little out of hand. Oops.
But come on, honestly, what do you expect from a guy who goes around calling himself Dr. Death? So, with nothing but a pistol at his side and a rifle on his back, Anderson sets out to rescue Sarah and avenge Anna's death. He's gonna kick ass, and modern chewing gum had just been invented, so likely he's out of it.
There's a bit more to this story than that, but I don't want to get into it, otherwise I'd probably ruin the ending. But other than that, every boss character sort of has their own personality, and has something to say to you before succumbing to the wounds that you give them.
What's your wife's name? What is it? You know, I kinda liked her. She smelled sweet, that woman. Like a rose. Now, what was it the bard said? What's in a name? That which we call a rose by any other name would smell as sweet. Let me see. Anna! Yes, that's her name. And does Anna smell sweet right now?
Oh, yes.
Don't leave me down here! To die and to go where we know not? To lie in cold obstruction and to rot? Is that what he said? Or was it?
Now, before I discuss gameplay, let's talk about presentation for a bit. From the second you start Outlaws, you're shown one of the game's many cutscenes, and from the clips I've already shown you, you can tell they're really well done. Well, for a 1997 game at least. The hand-drawn animation throughout the game looks nice, and while the primitive 3D animation looks a bit awkward, they only use it when absolutely necessary, so I think it can be forgiven. The hand-drawn art also follows into the in-game graphics, with all of your weapons looking really well drawn. The rest of the in-game graphics look really nice as well, with plenty of detail being put into the game's levels, and the many bandits are given many different designs. Speaking of bandits, the enemies in Outlaws are constantly taunting you.
Where are you, Marshal? You had enough yet? Ah! There he is! Get him! Oh! You're outnumbered! Don't be a fool, Marshal!
You should give up, Marshal! I'm the best in the West!
You're gonna have to do better than that, powder monkey!
The voice acting may not be great, but I always loved this as a kid. Now, as for gameplay, you think I wouldn't have to go over how you play a first-person shooter, especially if you've played Dark Forces, but you'd be wrong, this game changes things up quite a bit. First off, I'll discuss the weapons. While you start off with nothing but your fists, your pistol, and your rifle, you eventually amass a large inventory of weapons, all of which are suited for the time period and are different in subtle ways. A stark amount of realism was also put into developing the weapons. Each gun has its own range and ammo capacity, and the shells of buckshot that each shotgun fires actually spreads. You can even find a Gatling gun, and just like in real life, you can't move around while firing it. The interesting thing is, you don't actually need every weapon. It's entirely possible, although not recommended, to play the game with just your pistol. But I like to change it up between the pistol, the rifle with a scope attached, and one of the shotguns depending on my mood. Speaking of a scope, you may be interested to know that this is one of the very first FPSs to implement a sniper zoom. I mean, sure, it's very basic, but it's a staple of shooters today, so give this game at least a little credit. Reloading your guns is really interesting in Outlaws. It's not like other shooters where you press R or your gun automatically reloads once you've spent all your ammo. By default, reloading is mapped to the right mouse button, and you have to hold it to reload as if Anderson is manually inserting each bullet into the weapon, albeit very quickly. This, coupled with the way enemies and you yourself can only take a few hits before dying, allows for some intense gameplay. Revolver Ocelot said it best.
I love to reload during a battle. There's nothing like the feeling of slamming a long silver bullet into a well-greased chamber.
There are only 9 levels in the main story mode, but trust me, after the first few levels they get insanely huge. The first level is a simple farm which you can blast through quickly. The second level is a town called Sanctuary, which is quite a bit bigger. Level 3 is my favorite, the train level. It's a short and simple, but it doesn't require a lot of running around, and it's just plain fun. Level 4 is a canyon, and level 5 is a sawmill, and both are like a maze, so have fun navigating them. Eventually, having fought your way through hordes of bandits and criminals, you arrive at Graham's Ranch for a final showdown. After beating the campaign, you can play the historical missions, and by far the best of these is martial training. You take on new missions to apprehend bosses for amounts of money to promote yourself from deputy to sheriff and finally to marshal. Once you gain a certain badge, you can access locked levels, one of these being a mission based off the Peruvian temple of the Golden Idol from the beginning of Raiders of the Lost Ark. Nice touch there, LucasArts. There are tons of other Easter eggs throughout the game, and it seems like every time I play Outlaws, I discover new ones.
My Bonnie lies over the ocean. My Bonnie lies over the sea. My daddy lied over my mammy, and that's how they got little me. Ha 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 ha!
For example, when I was recording footage of the cutscenes for this review, I discovered at the end of the credits the game devs had put these lists titled Top 10 Quotes Heard During Game Production and 9 Signs You've Been Testing Outlaws for Too Long. That's like if I did this at the end of my review.
And finally, that brings us to the music. Outlaws' soundtrack was composed by a man named Clint Bajakian. Sorry if I'm pronouncing that last name wrong there. He's known for scoring for a bunch of other games, including Secret Monkey Island 2, Day of the Tentacle, and games even as recent as Uncharted 3. The game's 15 tracks were composed by an orchestra that used real-life instruments, which was not commonplace for the time. The soundtrack is available online, but if you own the game, you can actually use the discs as audio discs in a CD player. The soundtrack perfectly captures the mood and the setting of the game, and many of the songs are just great pieces of music in general. So, if at the least, I suggest giving these tracks a listen online. As I mentioned in this video's intro, Outlaws is one of the games that I grew up with as a kid. It was my first first-person shooter, and I have so many fond memories playing it with my dad. I mean, yes, you could probably say that I'm guilty of nostalgia tripping here, but I mean, this came out in 1995. And this came out 2 years later. That comparison alone speaks volumes to me about how much work and effort and love LucasArts put into Outlaws, and it's a real shame that it wasn't that big of a commercial success.
Well, this has been the first ever Fenris game review. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Feel free to subscribe to our channel if you guys liked this video. We try to put out something new every few weeks. Until next time, this is Fenris, signing out.